You will hear a man giving a talk about antibiotics. First, you'll have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
Good morning. My name is Dr. Green, and I'm going to talk to you today about antibiotics. Antibiotics are medicines that are used to treat bacterial infections. They're sometimes called antibacterials. They work by killing bacteria or preventing them from spreading, resulting in sicknesses or damaged immune system. This helps the body's natural immune system to fight the bacterial infection. Some common diseases, typically treated with antibiotics, can be tuberculosis or pneumonia. The first antibiotic was penicillin, discovered by Alexander Fleming in 1928. He was growing bacteria in dishes in his laboratory, and he found that one of the dishes had become contaminated with a fungus. He noticed that the bacteria around the fungus started to die off. So he carried out some tests on the fungus and discovered that it was producing a substance that was killing the bacteria. He called this substance penicillin, and it was the first antibiotic. Fleming published a paper on penicillin in 1929, but at the time it was very difficult to produce penicillin in large amounts, so nobody was interested in taking it further. Then, in 1938, two scientists in Oxford, Howard Florey and Ernst Chain, came across Fleming's paper and decided to try and produce penicillin in large quantities. The first thing they had to do was to obtain some of the fungus that produces penicillin, so they wrote to Fleming and he sent them some. They managed to produce enough penicillin to test it on mice. They infected the mice with bacteria and then gave half of them penicillin. The mice that were given penicillin survived, but the others died. Florey and Chain wanted to test penicillin on humans, but they could only produce very small amounts of it. They managed to treat one man who was dying of an infection, and he began to recover, but then they ran out of penicillin, and he died. However, they had shown that penicillin could be used to treat infections in humans. Florey realized that in order to produce penicillin in large quantities, he would need help from a drug company. He went to the United States to try and find one that was willing to help, and he managed to get a company called to produce penicillin for them. In 1944, they had enough penicillin to test it on a group of patients. The tests were successful, but they still didn't have enough penicillin to treat patients on a large scale. Then, in December 1941, the United States entered the Second World War, and the government realized that penicillin could be useful for treating soldiers who were injured in combat. They gave Florey and Chain a grant to enable them to work with more drug companies to produce penicillin on a large scale. By 1944, there was enough penicillin to treat all those who were wounded in the D-Day invasion of Europe. The discovery of penicillin led to the development of many other antibiotics. However, there are two problems with antibiotics. The first is that they don't work on viruses, so they can't be used to treat illnesses like flu or the common cold. The second problem is that bacteria can become resistant to antibiotics. This happens when antibiotics are used too often, or when patients don't complete the full course of antibiotics, which should last 5 to 7 days. In these cases, some bacteria in our bodies can survive and develop resistance to the antibiotics without our knowledge, so they are no longer effective in treating infections. In recent years, scientists have been developing new antibiotics to deal with resistant bacteria. However, this is a very slow process, and there are now some bacterial infections that cannot be treated with any known antibiotic. This is a very serious problem, and it's important that antibiotics are used carefully and only when necessary. The development of new antibiotics is a complex and lengthy undertaking. Researchers must identify novel compounds with antibacterial properties, test them rigorously for potency, that is, whether it can effectively kill the most stubborn bacteria, and safety, as in, does it kill what it needs to kill, or can it become lethal for human consumption? This can take many years, even decades, and involves significant financial investment. Furthermore, even when a new antibiotic is developed, its effectiveness may be short-lived, as bacteria can develop resistance to it relatively quickly. This creates a constant arms race between bacteria and scientists, who have to work tirelessly to solve new rising issues. The World Health Organization, WHO, has unequivocally stated that antibiotic resistance is a major threat to global health, a crisis that jeopardizes decades of progress in modern medicine and imperils the lives of millions. This isn't a distant problem for the future, it's happening right in front of our eyes. Okay, that's all I have to say about antibiotics. Does anyone have any questions?
That is the end of part 4. You now have 30 seconds to check your answers to part 4.